Hello, welcome back. Scott from Wessex Blades here. Thanks for joining me again. I'm going to have a go at adapting another of my blades. You might remember that I had the under license Mocha Magnum Machete. I wasn't happy with the flat top, dumbass sort of fat stout belly, and left a tip that I couldn't do much with. So I just turned it into a bit of a clip point, a bit of a bowie sort of look at the end. Made it lighter, it gave me a more functional tip. You know, I had a blade that long and an end I couldn't really do much with. And I've got another blade that's very similar in the fact that, you know, in hand and in use, for most of the tasks, the blade length is great because of the swing and the swish and the cut and everything else. But I'm left with the actual terminating point of the blade. There isn't much I can do with it. You know, if I wanted to pierce something, I wanted to cut something by poking in about, you know, a bit of a probe-around. If I wanted to do the depression in a fireboard or a bearing block for a bow drill set, I didn't really have a very usable final blade tip. So, excuse me, what I'm proposing to do is just take off a tiny mount of my beloved Ontario Army Machete 23-inch, because it's the same thing as that under license poker. There isn't much I can do with that. If it had a different shaped tip, I'm not going to go crazy. I'd have a front end I think I could do a lot more with. Just poking things around and, you know, holding it like this. I think I could do a lot more if the blade end was like that. Obviously what I've got here is a hardened and tempered blade that is great. So what I've got to do when I'm using, I'm going to use a very gentle, I'll try it on a circular sander disc on my combi little sander. I'll be into it a little bit and then make sure it's cool. Each time I do that, I dare say 5 to 10 times, the chalk will start coming off. So it's going to be a case of, it may not end out perfectly as I intended it at this point, but also I'm pretty good at grinding, so I'll get to something I'm quite happy with. And the reason I've got to dash it into water is because, for those of you who may not know, is the temper of the blade is set as it is. If I introduce too much heat, you can actually affect the hardness, the softness and the performance of the blade, and you still lose lovely little rainbow colours. So I've got to be very careful. It's not too complicated, but what you've got to do is as the heat builds up from the grinder or a cutter or whatever, give it a little bit of work, a little bit of energy, and then cool it back in some water. So it'll be done, I suppose it'll take me about 10 to 15 minutes, and very much like when I did that Mocha Magnum, don't rush. It's not a job for impatient of what I said, and this isn't. If I stuffed the temper up on this, I'd have a hell of a job, because I'd have to take the handles off in order to re-harden it, re-temper it if I was going to do it. You know, I'm not a metallurgist. I know how to do things from the beginning to the end, and I don't want to mess this up. So you just see me on the sander and douching more. So there you go. So what I've got now, I put a piece of paper there to contrast it. And so I just eased that top edge down, give me a far more useful tip. That wouldn't have done that before. I'll see if I find something to stab. Let's see how we get on. But that, for me, is a far more useful tip than was on there with that. That's a, you know, Tom Brown tracker edge. So thanks for joining me again. I'll let you know how I get on with it. Go watch it, please. Thanks for joining me again. Cheers.